Thank you. So I have always been fascinated by the future, by the possibilities, what might be. Even as a little kid, I remember that I was constantly imagining what the future might be like in 10, 20, 30 years. What kinds of things would we have? Would we have those flying cars that we had all hoped for, or the computers on our wrist, or what were the technologies that I was going to get to enjoy throughout my life? Because my life was going to exist in that future. That's part of why it was so exciting and a thing that I thought about so often. And I think that that's also a big part of why I really enjoyed school. And I know that that might be controversial, but that was me. I was one of those kids that enjoyed school because I could see how every one of these subjects that I was learning, or at least most of them, were going to help me have a better future, help me have the kind of future that I wanted. Math, science, grammar, all clearly going to be useful, not only in helping me have a better future, but in helping me make the future that I wanted to have. With one exception: history. I did not see the point of history. Why did I need to learn about all this stuff that had already happened? Why did that matter? How was that going to be pertinent to me? Did not care for it. And I remember very distinctly being 12 years old, first going into middle school, which was my first time having different teachers for every subject, which meant that there was going to be a teacher dedicated to just teaching me this useless thing. But it gave me the opportunity to ask them. They should know, what is the purpose? Why do I need to learn this? And I very blatantly asked on my very first day of class with Mr. H, my history teacher, why? What does this matter? And for the next couple weeks, we went back and forth, him trying to explain to me why it was important, me never liking the answers that he gave. And ultimately, it felt like he kept coming back to this idea that if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. Many of us have heard that. I thought that was a terrible reason to learn history, because he and I both agreed that you could learn all about history and still repeat it. And it seemed so focused on avoiding the bad. And what I wanted to do is create the good, the cool, the amazing in the future. And so we agreed to disagree. I made it through his class with good grades and everything, but I learned nothing. I wasn't interested. I learned nothing. It was just memorize, regurgitate, forget, move on. And I wish that I hadn't. I wish that I'd learned a lot more there, because sometime as I became a young adult, I began to realize just how valuable history was to helping me have the kind of future that I wanted. It gave me the data points that I needed to understand the present and the direction that things are going, so that I could make better decisions, take better actions to affect the kind of future that I wanted. And so this kid that hated history class all growing up wants to take us on a quick history lesson of the internet before we talk about the present of the internet, so that we all know what we're actually talking about. So I'm about to embrace my inner history teacher. 1991, quick jump back, 34 years, right? This is not that long ago. But 1991 is an important year to everyone here, whether you realize it or not, because that is the year that the internet, sort of as we know it, came to be. The commercial internet exchange was working to take all these siloed networks of information, these vast wealths of information that existed at places like universities and governmental agencies. They wanted to interconnect those networks and form the internet. And they succeeded in doing that. But the controversial thing around what they were doing at the time is that they wanted everyone that connected to this interconnected network to agree to a no settlement policy, which essentially meant that it would ensure that data and information flowed back and forth between those networks once they were connected. They wanted to make sure that these silos of information that were siloed physically because they weren't connected to other places didn't become digital silos that still locked away all their information and kept it to themselves. And so from the very beginning, the internet's purpose was to share around information. And at that same time, 89, 90, 91, Tim Berners-Lee, in association with CERN, was developing a lot of the stuff that we use to interact with the network, things that we're probably familiar with, like the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP, and Hypertext Markup Language, or HTML, and they developed the first ever web browser, released it in 1991, and the internet was born, and it looked something like this. Not as flashy or as pretty as maybe we expect today, but we can all see our roots here, right? Like this was the start. And the important thing that I want everybody to take away from this quick kind of history on the beginning of the internet is not necessarily the people that made it happen, although I'm grateful to them because I've built my life and my livelihood on things that they built. And it's not even the specific technologies, although we can see that we're still using some of them today. It's really how open the internet was at its very beginning. The no settlement policy meant that information was flowing freely between all these networks. Things like HTTP and HTML, these were open standards. So while maybe Tim Berners-Lee and CERN were the first ones to have a web browser, anyone could implement those standards and make their own web browser or their own way of experiencing or accessing this information. And I think that that is a key data point in understanding how things have changed over the last 34 years. But before we leave 1991, that was also a very pivotal year in my life that very much set the direction that put me on the path to stand on this stage and talk to you about the open web. I was only 9 years old, and so it may sound unbelievable that like the direction of my life was set at 9 years old, but it's okay. 9-year-old me wouldn't have believed it either. I certainly didn't realize it was happening. If we could travel back to 91 and talk to 9-year-old me, I would probably just talk your ear off about this, the Super Nintendo, right? It was amazing. First of all, so much better than the original Nintendo. I mean, the gameplay was so smooth, the graphics, I mean, look at this, right? Like, so much better than the graphics of the original Nintendo. And I spent a lot of time, 9 years old, playing video games and Super Nintendo games specifically. It wasn't a Super Nintendo video game that set the direction of my life, but it was a video game. It was this one. All right, lots of you recognize the Super Nintendo, but who recognizes this? Not so many old people here, clearly. That's actually kind of great. But this is a game called Gorillas. It was distributed in 1991 with MS-DOS 5. And as you can see, the graphics were pretty terrible. But the gameplay, no, that was also terrible. But I spent a lot of time playing this game as a kid. Why would I have played this game so much when I had all the amazingness that was the Super Nintendo? Well, because of this. See, this game wasn't distributed by Microsoft to show off the amazing gameplay capabilities or graphics capabilities of PCs. It was distributed to show off QBasic, their integrated development environment for the BASIC programming language. And so it was distributed as source code. And this was my first taste of openness in technology. I was obviously into technology. I knew that that was going to be a part of the future, but this was my first kind of peek under the hood that I was able to get at how this was made and realizing that I could be a part of making it. And I was amazed every time. The way you would run this game, by the way, you would open QBasic, you would load the source code file, so you would see all this text, and then you'd hit Shift F5 to compile and run, and you'd play the game. And I was amazed that all this text could turn into that game, as mediocre as it was. And I would scroll down through that text, and soon that amazement turned into curiosity. What would happen, and could I make changes? Could I make it better? I'd make some changes, shift F5, and it wouldn't work because I didn't know what I was doing. But slowly, I learned from it, and I was able to make minor changes and then bigger changes. And eventually, I actually had several versions of this game that I had built that were kind of pretty significantly different from the original that my friends and I would play. And that was neat to me. I loved that, and that is what set me down the path of becoming a developer, of getting into technology myself. And the important part of this story, though, is not, I could not have written this game by myself at age 9. I wasn't like some amazing genius, and I didn't know the coding language, and it wasn't easy to learn them at that time, by the way. In 1991, you couldn't just Google how to develop in BASIC because Google didn't come out till 98, and you couldn't watch YouTube videos to learn it because that didn't come out till 2004, right? The way that I was able to learn this was by taking something that someone else had done, these Microsoft engineers that wrote this game, and put it out there in the open where I could see it, so I could learn from it and build on top of it. And that basic concept is really how we as people kind of move forward, make progress, get further than anybody before us has ever gotten. And that concept clearly isn't just mine. It dates back to at least the 12th century. I did say that I like history now, right? It dates back to at least the 12th century, where Bernard of Chartres, a philosopher and teacher, is quoted as telling his students that we, the moderns, we're not better or smarter than the ancients. We're just like dwarves standing on their shoulders, so we can see further and do more. And if you've heard that saying but have no idea who this is, it's probably because a very famous scientist said it again 500 years later in a letter. Isaac Newton said, "If I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." And I promise this ties into the internet in a very direct way. We look back at Isaac Newton, we maybe think of him more like a giant. He gave us some really amazing things, Newtonian physics that let us know how planets move, and calculus that helps us make sure that skyscrapers stay standing and jet engines fly, right? Like modern stuff that he did many, many years ago. But what he said is, I was not a giant. I was just able to stand on those that came before me. I was able to learn from them. And every time throughout history that we've gotten better at sharing information, we've made leaps forward in progress, because the better we are at sharing information, the more of that we can absorb from the people that came before us, and therefore the better our starting place is to build from. When we first got written language, leap forward. When we started writing on paper and we're able to bring all that into libraries to go to and learn from, leap forward. The printing press, so we were able to distribute all that written work, leaps forward. And that was the time that Isaac Newton was born into, but we've done better since then. We've digitized all that information so it's easier to find. We put it into computers and shrunk those down from rooms until they could fit on our desk, until they could fit in our pockets. And we developed the internet, which lets us distribute all that digital information, much like the printing press let us distribute the printed information, except even further and faster around the world in the blink of an eye. You can learn something here today that somebody figured out in Canada 2 hours ago. It is available here now. And that's mind-boggling, right? The information is the single most the internet is the single most effective information sharing tool of all time. And sharing information is how we make progress forward as people. It is accomplishing the task that the commercial internet exchange set out to accomplish. And that's important. I know that lots of us see the internet as a fun place, and lots of us see the internet as a place that supports our livelihoods. And I think having fun is important. I certainly think that our livelihoods are important. But there's an even bigger purpose that the internet is serving, and that's helping us make progress forward. And so now we understand where we started. We understand the importance of the internet, hopefully. Where are we now? Well, good news for all of us here, the internet is growing significantly. This is not a graph, by the way, of the size of the internet. This is not like number of web pages or domains. This is global reach of the internet, percentage of the global population that has access to this amazing tool. And as you can see, back in 2015, just 10 years ago, roughly 40% of the population. Just 2 years ago in 2023, 67%. Up 27% in just 8 years. That's phenomenal. And so when you think about this, and you think about how great the internet is, how much it has improved many of our lives, how useful it is to people moving forward, I would say that right now, the state of the internet is very strong. Looking at the growth pattern and the way that more and more people are able to access it than ever before, the future's pretty bright, right? I think that we should all be a little excited about that. Like, that's great. But also, I do think that there are some dangers, some things that put this amazing tool at risk. And I think that if I only talked about the good, if I only talked about how amazing everything was, I would feel irresponsible. So I want to at least take some time to talk about what I see is the biggest risk that the internet faces right now, and that is closed systems. And what I mean by closed systems are any of these systems, tools, platforms, etc., that we use, that we maybe even rely on, that are owned by other people or companies, and that can lock us in. Yes, that's things like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, but it's also things like Google, right? That's a thing that we use, we all rely on, but that's owned by someone else, and we don't know exactly how it works. We couldn't just shift away from it very easily. I want to be clear that just because something is closed doesn't make it bad. Like, all of these things are great. I use most of those that I listed, and I think that they improve my life. They make things better for me, and that's great. But because they're owned by someone else, they introduce some sort of risk, right? What happens if the owner of that tool or platform that you use or rely on, what if their goals or needs diverge from your goals or needs? Well, they're going to do what's best for them. That's expected. That's understood. But where does that leave you? Have you taken the time to think about that? And I think that for many of us, we sort of recognize that risk, right? We're here every day. We're working on it. We sort of recognize that risk, but I think it's real easy for us to play up the benefits of all these closed platforms and play down the risks a little bit because we're so close to it, right? We're in it all day, every day. We feel like we understand it, and we've kind of normalized to it a little bit. Even though if we look back 34 years to the beginning of the internet, it's a pretty big change, but we've normalized to it some. So I want to take a step back from where we all spend our time in the internet and look at a different industry that's pretty different from ours, but that it has followed the same kind of arc, but further on than the internet has, and take a look at how that affected them and see if that might map to how it would affect us. I want to talk about farming. And specifically the tractors on these farms, and how over time some closed platforms got introduced into tractors that run farms, and how that has caused farmers to actually need to hack their tractors in order to protect their livelihood. And I am not going to go into the entire history of farming, although it is fascinating. But I think that all that matters to us is that, like, a long time ago, we were pretty terrible at farming, and we got better at it over time, and we developed better tools over time. And, sometime in the Industrial Revolution, we got tractors, and that was great. Farmers' lives improved, right? Life was easier for them. It was better. Quality of life improvement and efficiency improvement, right? They were able to do more so fewer people had to farm. Some of us could do other things. That's all great. And then we move forward even more to the technological revolution, and these tractors got so much better, much the way that our cars have. The inside of these tractors looks like this. Computer screens everywhere, right? It's amazing. And also, quick note, where this picture is taken inside the cab of this tractor, air conditioned. The farmer gets to sit on an air ride seat that makes it nice and comfortable, right? Their lives are so much better because of this, and that's great. Our tools should make our lives better. Now imagine that we're one of these farmers that gets this tractor. We're super excited, especially because our farm is growing. We want to be able to do more, and the only way to really manage a modern farm is with some of this modern technology. So we get one of these, we get in it, we tap one of these screens, it comes to life for the first time. We see a bunch of mumbo jumbo. We agree to a bunch of terms and conditions, the same kind of thing that we do when we get a new phone, right? Blah, 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 blah. To the phone, to the exciting part. We see the control panel. It's got a nice green start button. We tap that and the tractor rumbles to life. And that's so exciting. We drive it out to our field and we pull up maps on one of these screens, and we tap around like the corners of our field, and it locks in GPS coordinates for where your field is, so now it knows. The tractor's smart. It now knows where your field is. And you tell it, I need to level my field. I'm going to be planting soon. I need to level my field. Go. And it just starts doing it. You are riding in the tractor rather than driving the tractor in air conditioning on an air ride seat as it maneuvers its way around your field, automatically adjusting the height and pitch of the blade to level your field for you. That is a way better quality of life than farmers had at one time, right? That's amazing. Of course we're excited about these amazing tools that are making our lives better. And it's not just that it was more comfortable or faster, and the field is more level than it ever was. And that's not just like bragging rights, my field's more level than yours, that's more profit. Because with a perfectly level field, when you irrigate it, when you flood it with water, every plant gets the same amount of water. You don't have some that got underwatered and some that got overwatered. And so you can control the right amount of water for all your plants to get the optimal yield. You are more profitable now. That's great. And that's the kind of time that we are on the internet right now, where we have all these closed tools, these things that we've clicked through those terms and conditions that are owned by someone else, but they're making our lives better. And that's great. But that's not where the arc ends for these farmers and these tractors. At some point, a tractor breaks down. Well, according to those terms and conditions, you have to take it to an authorized service center. You used to be able to just fix it yourself, but now you have to take it to an authorized service center. So you do. And boy, the price is a lot higher to get it fixed there. But it makes your life better. You make more money with it. Okay, you'll pay the higher price. It doesn't feel good, but you do it. And then eventually, a tractor breaks down at a really inopportune time. You are just getting ready to harvest, and your tractor won't work. So you take it to authorized service center, and not only does the price hit you kind of hard, but they say that they can fix it in 2 weeks. And you say, 2 weeks? No, it's harvest time now. If I wait 2 weeks, my crop dies and I go bankrupt. That doesn't work for me. But there's no alternative. There's no other authorized service center. So, of course, you're not just going to go bankrupt easy, you're going to break the rules. You're going to go fix the tractor yourself. So you take the tractor back home and, let's imagine it's something super simple. A tire pressure sensor. It thinks your tire's flat and it's not. No big deal. You have those on other tractors. You're going to take it off one. Or your buddy down the street, they have one on one of their tractors. You're going to take it off and put it on yours. And you do, because you're capable. You're going to figure it out yourself. And then you put this working part on your tractor and you go to harvest. You get in, you tap the screen, and it comes up with a big red error that says, hey, the serial number on this part doesn't match the one that I'm programmed with. You're not allowed to use this. Take it to an authorized service center. That's not going to work for you. So you realize you need to trick it into accepting this new part. What a hassle, right? So you figure out how to connect to the system, but you don't know how to break in. So you and your consortium of farmers hire a group of hackers. This is what really happened. If you want to go read about this story, it is absolutely fascinating. But a farming consortium hires a group of hackers to crack the operating system of tractors so that they could fix it themselves, because these tools, they had been improving their lives so much, were now imperiling their livelihoods, and they couldn't have that. And there was a time where farmers were distributing cracked versions of tractor operating systems so that they could continue to make money and not go broke. And that's because they did not have viable alternatives that they could use instead of these closed platforms. The older tractors that didn't have these terms and conditions could not run a modern farm. They were stuck. We're not there on the internet right now. And that's great. All of these things that we're using, these Facebooks, Twitters, Instagrams, etc., there are open alternatives that we could turn to if we want to. If it actually put our business and our livelihood at risk, if we were at risk of going bankrupt, we could change. But there was no WordPress tractor that was open source that they could turn to, so they were stuck. And we don't want to get to that part of the arc in our story, right? So now we've looked at the start of the internet, we've looked at why it's important, and we've looked at another industry that went along this arc. Now let's start talking about where we are and what's immediately ahead. What do we know about the future of the internet? We can't for sure know anything about the future, but with all the information that we've just talked about, we can get a pretty good understanding of where we're going. First, the internet's growing. We looked at that graph, right? It's growing in reach, and it's going to continue to grow. We're seeing that growth just accelerate, and that's fantastic, because the internet is an amazing tool that has benefited my life so much, and I hope that more and more people get to benefit from it as well. It is changing. I mean, we saw the screenshot of the internet in '91. Doesn't look like that anymore. But at its core, it is still very much the same. It is still an amazing information sharing tool that we also use for a whole lot of other really fun and interesting things. And in that way, it has continued to be a very stable and growing backbone for all kinds of technologies, right? So many apps that we don't necessarily think, like they're not web browsers, they're just apps that are using the internet in the background. And we're all in tech, so we recognize this a lot more at this conference than people maybe do at others. All the social media platforms, those are all using the internet in the background, but so are maps and our weather app, right? All of these things are using the internet in the background. Heck, my washing machine at home, I just got a new washer, it uses the internet. And I'm not even 100% sure why, but it does, right? It's in everything. And because of that, our lives have become very intertwined with the internet. I don't necessarily think that's bad, because it has improved things for so many of us. I think that my life is better because of it, and I think that many of yours are too. But will it be less open? I mean, if we look at where we started 34 years ago and where we are, the trend line says yes, it will be less open. More and more people will only experience the internet through these closed systems and these closed platforms. More and more people will find themselves locked into things that are maybe not the best for them, but they have no alternative, no way to move to something else. But I put the question marks by this one because I think that we can help prevent some of that. Because the internet itself is not the future. Like, we have that right now. I think that the reason that I wanted to make sure to point this out is because all of us here, we're making and creating the internet. You all are helping make this thing. And so it's up to us where it goes from here. It's up to us whether we keep these alternatives around, these viable alternatives, so that we aren't locked into something that we don't want to be. Because the internet definitely sets us up for a better future, right? Imagine the possibilities as it continues to grow and reach. More and more people are able to access it, and so all of us are able to share information in an even broader, bigger way, collaborate with more and more people than we ever had before, learn from more and more people, but also market to more and more people, learn how to create our, more business opportunities for more and more people. This is an amazing potential future. If those of us here that are helping to build and create this thing ensure that it stays that way, right? That's on us. And I want to see this not only stay around for us so that we can all benefit from it, but for future generations too. So what can we do? Quick few suggestions here at the end before I take some questions. First and foremost, we can be aware of what's going on, right? I think that that's why I want to do talks like this and make sure that we're all thinking about this. I hope that you all spend some time thinking about it more than just listening to me up on this stage, but taking some time to think about, hey, what am I using? What are my risks? Do I have a way to move to something else? Or am I finding myself stuck like one of these farmers and that could be bad for me in the future? Can I start getting into a better, healthier place now? Spread the word. Everyone here is not just building the internet. You all are the internet expert to someone. Every one of you has people that look at you and say, that's my internet expert. They know all about it. Which means that this group can not only help make sure that what you're doing is good for the internet, but you can make sure that you're helping guide clients, friends, family into things that don't lock them in or risk their future as well. And to do that, we use open platforms. Obviously, I'm at a WordPress conference, so I'm speaking to the choir a little bit here because you all use WordPress. And I think that WordPress is an extremely amazing, viable alternative to many of the closed source platforms on the web. That is the thing that has kept me contributing to this project for more than 18 years now, because I think that that's important, that's exciting. And some of us can contribute to the project. Some of us are just using it to ensure that the companies we're building websites for are not locked in anywhere, that they can continue to own and run their systems the way that they want to. And all of that is amazing. All of that helps keep WordPress and other open source solutions as a counterbalance to those closed things, because closed isn't bad. It just has that risk. And as long as there's the counterbalance to balance that out, we can benefit from all these closed tools, but not be completely beholden to them in a way that risks our income or our future. And lastly, vote with your money, right? Support the people and the platforms and the companies that are supporting the open web, because that's how we ensure our future there. So I'm Aaron Campbell, Director of Product at A2 Hosting, one of those hosting companies that believes in the open web and is currently supporting it. And I think that I have time for some questions if anybody has any.